Hello, Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure having you. This has been an incredible week. Today is day 6. We started.
Wow.
We started focusing on happiness in the workplace on the 18th. We move into health and mental health education, and we'll focus on positive education, the systems that are working. Then actually we connected live with the launch of the World Happiness Report.
Great.
And I was there, it was fantastic. Congratulations. Then we focus on self and planet. So we connected how we can do more by actually healing ourselves before. On Monday, yesterday, we focused on technology and transformative technologies, the way we are really exponentially moving into another space thanks to technology. And today we focus on policy making and governance. So having you here is just a dream come true, because if there is somebody who knows what is the world happiness state link at the same time to sustainability, is you. So I think that the way, everybody knows you, but if somebody doesn't, Jeffrey Sachs is the president of Sustainable Development Solutions. He's been behind the World Happiness Report, Sustainable Development Goals, key advisor and key driver at the United Nations of so much good going on today in the world. So first of all, congratulations and thank you so much for joining.
Well, it's great to be with you, and thank you for this whole week of happiness. We need happiness. These are difficult times, actually, and I think what the happiness report does is, at least, and what you are very much doing, is help to point us in the direction of a better world and what we need to be doing. Clearly, we're not doing a great job right now on happiness, and I'm still reeling from the fact that we have another multiple shooting in the United States today. 10 deaths more. It sometimes feels like things are really, really coming unhinged, and so the happiness idea is to get us to focus back on important matters and to measure them and to understand where we should be directing our efforts to relieve suffering and to improve well-being, to be more generous, to be more caring in society. We have a long way to go, actually. And COVID has, in one sense, as you know from the report, it's shown some impressive resilience. It's also highlighted places where people are cooperating for the common good, but it's also exposed a lot of weaknesses, actually. All of the Americas, our part of the world, we have not done a good job of getting this pandemic under control. Poor people have really suffered. Political leadership has been very erratic. So it's a difficult time, Luis. But it's the right time to be focusing on what we should be doing. There's going to be a lot of effort in the coming years and even in the coming months to build back better from this catastrophe. And we're going to have a lot of summit meetings later this year at the UN on climate change, on food systems, on biodiversity. They're all part of the happiness agenda, because basically happiness will come living more decently and consistently with each other and with the planet Earth, and that's what we have to work on.
So you were in charge. One of the chapters is definitely focused on COVID as part of the World Happiness Report, and if we combine sustainability, happiness, and COVID, maybe this is something that you can give us, bring some light about what is the state of sustainability and happiness under COVID? What has changed and what do you see? Where are we heading?
Let me say a few words about this pandemic that we're all suffering from. First, we know that this is a disease that was transmitted from bat populations to human populations. We don't know exactly how and when. The evidence is rather strong that this was a natural occurrence, not something that came out of a laboratory, despite a lot of claims or fake news or other things to the contrary. The best evidence is that this was natural, though we still have to study exactly the origins. Maybe it came from a laboratory, but it seems most likely that it came from nature. And what we do know is that lots of diseases are coming from nature because we are disrupting nature. So what's happening is that our societies all over the world are entering places that they didn't, that they weren't in before, and disrupting animal populations, and also then suffering from diseases that are passing from the animal populations to the human populations. So we've had SARS, now we have COVID-19, which is another SARS-like virus. We had the Middle East respiratory syndrome, and we've had many other emerging diseases. The first thing that the experts are saying is we're going to have more unless we are taking care of nature and taking care of ourselves better. And what's incredible is that there were many warnings, not only about the possibility of new emerging diseases, but specifically of this kind of disease, a coronavirus coming from bats. And the politicians didn't listen. So I have to say, in general, politicians make me unhappy. They don't make me happy because they don't do their job. Their job is not to win elections. Their job is not to hold office. Their job is not to cater to friends. Their job is to take care of society's well-being. Their job is to look after the common good. And the politicians like Trump or like so many others do not take care. And that's the first thing we learn about this COVID, that we had warnings, but we didn't heed the warnings. And then the next thing we learn about COVID is that it actually was controllable early on. And in China, where the outbreak occurred first, by about 8 weeks after the outbreak, China had actually stopped the transmission of the virus. In the United States, we were too dumb to do that because we had Trump, who's an awful person, and didn't want to listen to scientists, didn't want to listen to expertise, and just kept saying, oh, it's going to go away on its own. It's going to go away after Easter. It's going to go away with springtime. It makes me furious, actually, even though we're supposed to be happy. It makes me furious that we're in the hands of such nincompoops who know so little, care so little, listen so little, and then expose our societies to so much harm. So I've been studying this issue, Luis, since the first days, because I had experience already for the last 20 years with control of disease. I had chaired a commission for the World Health Organization 20 years ago that talked about AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. So I had some experience with these diseases and how they could be brought under control. And from the first days of COVID-19, I was saying, let's look at what's happening in China and in other countries in Asia because they're doing a better job than we are. But again, our politicians and a lot of the public wasn't interested in learning from other places. So one of the ways to be happier is to learn from success, not to ignore it. And we ignored the fact that all over the Asia Pacific, halfway around the world from us, in Australia, New Zealand, Korea, China, Japan, Vietnam, and other countries, this was brought under control. Not completely, but mostly. But in our part of the world, in the Americas, no control, little control. We had Trump saying, ignore it. We had AMLO saying, ignore it. We had Bolsonaro saying, ignore it. These people make me really mad because they are not doing their jobs. They're not doing the core function of helping to make us better off and make us safer. They're making it up. They are absolutely, in my view, irresponsible and incompetent. And in the United States, we've had 530,000 deaths from COVID. And it shows something really wrong in our society to have so many deaths when China, which is 4 times the size of the United States, has had fewer than 5,000 deaths. We had 100 times more deaths than China, with the population 1/4 the size. So this is another point that we have learned. Another thing that we've learned is we need to take care of each other if we're going to manage a crisis like this. Of course, this crisis posed many, many deep challenges. The most important was don't infect each other. Yeah. So learn to wear face masks, learn to keep physical distancing, learn to watch our own symptoms so that we are aware if we're sick. And our government should be helping us with tests, with contact tracing, with financial support to help isolate if necessary, and with financial support for people who lost their incomes or their jobs. That's the most important thing we should have learned. Be responsible to other people, not only to keep ourselves healthier, but to make sure we don't spread this to other people. And we didn't really learn that very well. We had in the United States so many protests against wearing face masks. That's not only against scientific knowledge, it's against happiness. It's against creating trust in society. It's arrogant because you don't wear face masks just to protect yourself. You wear face masks to protect other people as well, because you want to be sure not to spread an infection. So this is another point that we have learned, which is that we need to take care of each other. Of course, this disease and this pandemic also created so many conditions of isolation and so many hardships for older people or for people living alone or for poor people, that while we have to take care not to spread infection and so on, we also have to take care socially to help people who are hurt, or to set up even online ways to keep in contact with people, to give people access to the internet so that they're not isolated, or that children can go to school online and so on. So we learned a lot about the need also to take quick steps to make sure that our society doesn't divide even further into the haves and the have-nots. And one of the big divisions is the digital division. We're online together. We're able to see each other, and I'm able to congratulate you for your wonderful work. But half the world's not on the internet right now. Half the world doesn't have access yet. And yet it would not take much to ensure that everybody has access. It would just take some help, because poor people can't afford it. So they need the extra help. And that's what the world as a whole and our government should be providing. So that's the next part of this, that we need social inclusion and social justice. to fight a pandemic like this. So when I put all the pieces together, I very much come to the philosophy of sustainable development, which I think is a really important philosophy, because sustainable development says three things. We want better lives. That's number one. Second, we want social justice. And third, we want an environment that is protected and safe. We need all three. We need the economic progress, we need the social justice and social inclusion, and we need the environmental sustainability. I did a study last year together with my co-editor, Jan Emmanuel Deneuve, whom you know very well.
Yes.
And we looked at how sustainable development promotes happiness. So if a society focuses on all three of these pillars, not only the economics, which our politicians like to talk about, but the social justice and the environmental sustainability, you get a big boost of happiness. And so I believe that from COVID-19, we actually learned that we need sustainable development, but we also should emphasize that sustainable development is going to bring better lives and happiness for the public.
Jeffrey, something that we've been exploring, actually we just had a panel on designing public policy to bring well-being to the next step, is that many countries are starting to be ready. We see New Zealand, we see Scotland, we see many nations, even cities that are actually orienting, and we saw that in Dubai, of course, as one of the cities that is been leading from and is at the front. But something that is always actually amazed me is that if we look at the power, the structure of power in the world, right now we have 8 billionaires managing the same wealth as 3.6 billion people. But then we have basically 220 plus leaders. It's a small number, really, in order to influence somehow. I want to combine this. For example, Sadhguru, he said, well, bring me all these 200 leaders, I will change consciousness in a week. What is your perspective on responsible leadership, wealth? Is the concept of equity? We spoke about social justice, but let's incorporate the equity space into here. Why is it so difficult?
Let me mention one interesting point. You mentioned three places, New Zealand, Scotland, and the Emirates. And in all three, the leader of the Happiness Initiative is a woman. And this is not a coincidence. In New Zealand, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern is a terrific prime minister. And when the pandemic hit, she said, we're going to lock down to get this under control. And she saved New Zealand from mass deaths. And then she went for re-election and won in a landslide. Whereas this idiot president, by former President Trump, who created so much suffering, thought, I don't want to take strong measures because I'm up for election. And it was his incompetence and his lack of caring that got him defeated. So that's a good sign, at least. We threw him out because he was a bum. Now, in Scotland, the chief minister is a woman. And Minister O'Hood, who led as the state minister for happiness and well-being of the UAE, now followed by Minister Hesse, both women who are caring. I don't think it's a coincidence, by the way, because, our part of the species, Luis, is pretty weird, actually. Men just seem more hardwired for conflict, more hardwired to find division. Women, I think, probably, psychologically and biologically are more caring. And so it was more natural maybe for them to say happiness. Now, I also believe in education and reform, so I think men can even get it, possibly. But I think it comes easier to women. And we've seen, not only in the countries I've mentioned, but in Denmark, in Finland, in Iceland, in other places with women leadership, better outcomes. So one thing I would recommend for all of us is more women in politics and more women in power. And that is SDG number 5, gender equality. And that is gender equality in every aspect of life. But part of it is in the educational system, and then in politics and in the corporate boardrooms as well. I personally think this would lead to a better world, more uplift, and maybe all of these issues come more naturally. I watch the men, God, they love to fight, which is disgusting. You know, one of the things that I'm really bothered about right now, I very much like the improvements underway in the US with the Biden administration, because Joe Biden's a very decent person, and Kamala Harris is a wonderful example of a woman leader who is going to be a great vice president. But even so, we're still entering a kind of new Cold War with China. Yeah. Why so much conflict right now? Why not find cooperation, which is what we should be emphasizing? Instead, we're calling names, pointing fingers, engaging in sanctions. You know, my country should not do this because we have enough problems with mass shootings every other day, with all our other ills, that we should not be name calling other countries. And so I think that it's somehow this competitiveness that is really a terrible blight. But one of the points that we should be emphasizing in your great work and in the World Happiness Report is the outstanding leadership that women provide on this issue and can help accelerate the way forward.
Well, Jeffrey, something I love, honestly, every time I hear you and I listen to you, is the transparency and the openness of what you say. So this is very important now, because we really need to get to the wounds. And if we don't get to the real wounds, it's impossible to heal. So I think that we've been, over the last months and probably years, through collective suffering. The only way we can really move on is through collective healing. But if we have all these leaders trying to keep fighting and dividing, we are not going to get to collective healing.
It's, you know, one of the things I've come to learn only in old age, I have to say, is how many myths we live by and how little we really understand our own societies often, and therefore get to the root causes of the problem. And I have spent a lot of the COVID year reading American history books, because even though I'm supposed to know a lot about this, I found how many gaps I had in my knowledge about the injustices in American history. And so much of our division today and the racism today, of course, I knew the history, but I didn't know the full depth of it. And the more I've looked at the past history, the more I feel we've never really healed properly. And so many of the divisions that make it so hard for us to move forward are very deep-seated, but they're unspoken. You know, in America, but it's true of a lot of the Americas, race and the divisions and the fact that our whole continent, you know, was a conquest society. First European conquerors, indigenous populations suppressed, killed off by disease, and then African slavery. It made such a melange of our societies, but such deep-rooted injustices also. And we've never really overcome those injustices. And one of the points, for example, is so much of the American gun culture and violence was white violence on African Americans and the gun violence against runaway slaves, for example. And so we ended up, because we never really honestly took this on, we've ended up in a society of hundreds of millions of handguns. And by the way, those guns spread through to Central America, all through the Americas. So we ended up with this mass circulation of these terrible weapons, and therefore, of course, there are distressed, crazy people, but they get their hands on automatic weapons. So every couple of days, we open up our eyes to a new mass killing in the United States. So all I'm saying about this is, if one knows the history of this, this has been a long issue. It had nothing to do with freedom and weapons. It had to do with suppression. From the very start, it had to do with violent suppression of Native Americans and violent suppression of African Americans. And that led to a violent society. And that's not a happy society. And so we need to touch on some of these issues to the core, but it's hard because it's deliberately suppressed, this kind of information. And it takes an effort, I must say, to keep going back to the roots, like you say.
Well, we have to do it. And I know that you are leading the charge in order to do it. So I just want to congratulate you and thank you because of your leadership. Everything that you are doing is so important. You know that we are here to help. We are here to make the message as broad as possible and to actually create a secure base for those who are in the front lines of suffering. So you have here.
Well, Luis, you are leading, and remarkably, because you have put together this incredible network of people in business, in society, in government that are following this. So we're here to help you and to congratulate you on your leadership. But I'm so happy to be part of this week, this World Happiness Week. And we will develop more and more ways, but we're going to really build this agenda because it's what we need.
Yes, we are here together. Thank you so much, Jefferson.
Fantastic. Great to be with you. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Bye.